I'm Matthew Welch, one of the curators here at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts, and we're in main storage, looking in the area where we store most of the Chinese antiquities, or that is, those objects that aren't on view at the moment. And there are any number of objects that we have here that were gifts of Mr. and Mrs. Augustus Searle. They actually gave us our first big gift of Chinese art. It came into the museum in 1928. But we'll be looking at a variety of things that were gifts from them. One of the most spectacular and I think bizarre aspects is a group of Rhino Horn Cups. And I'm holding maybe one of the most elaborate examples here, heavily carved on the bottom, but this is the tip of a rhino's horn, and then the interior forms the cup, as you see here. And so these would be filled with rice wine, and it would be drunk that way, particularly by gentlemen, because it believed that these had a kind of aphrodisiac effect by drinking wine from them. This is a really elegant example with this very exuberant handle, as you see here, but very shallowly carved scrolling floral decoration around this area. And then also, not sure if I'm catching the light so that you can see it, but also a band running around the interior. So although these are odd pieces, created from a very odd material, these craftsmen created objects that are really sublimely beautiful. What we're looking at in this drawer is maybe the lion's share of what came from the Searles, and it's an amazing collection of Chinese snuff bottles. Now, the Chinese actually outlawed the smoking of tobacco during the Qing dynasty, but they allowed snuff to be used. And of course, snuff is powdered tobacco that was snorted, and so it became a kind of gentlemanly pastime to collect extraordinary bottles to hold snuff. And so the Searles did a fantastic job of collecting any number of examples. In this case, I'm holding a small porcelain one with overglaze enameled colors, so a very delicate, beautiful example. Another example, as you see here, is a piece of unusual abalone. I'm not sure if I'm catching the iridescence, but the center features these unusual pieces of abalone, and the side have very delicately inlaid patterns of abalone there. Other examples are extraordinary for their craftsmanship. In this case, a piece of natural stone that's been hollowed out and then very carefully painted from the interior. So what you're looking at is the artist actually inserted a brush into the interior of this and rendered this very detailed painting of a pair of cranes beneath a pine tree from the interior. And that way he was making sure that, of course, it wouldn't wear off as you handled the object. In fact, while these were actually used, on the opposite side is a beautiful painting of a court woman. While they were actually used, they were also collectibles. Sometimes natural pieces of stone, in this case an agate being carved to that degree. Another example of glass painting. So the total number of pieces given by Mr. and Mrs. Searle come close to being about 500 objects. One really beautiful example, a rather plain one, in this case, a piece of crystal. And so the artist has really capitalized on the purity of this crystal. But the interesting thing, of course, is there's still snuff remaining, and you can see it flowing around the small spoon on the inside. We usually have a selection of these on view. They're off view just right now because we use that space also for entertaining. So we take them down so that they're safe here in the basement, and then put them back on display. This is their permanent home. We have a very systematic storage system here. There are numbers on each of these, and those numbers designate when they were acquired, and then they also have an address. They would absolutely go right back in this drawer when they come off view. Certainly the Searle material is easy to love, and it is a favorite among the Minneapolis community. It's hard not to be astonished by the craftsmanship and beauty of these pieces. You see in this case a piece of carved glass again with an amber exterior, yellow interior. They're just jewel-like, and that's true not only for this material, that is the snuff bottles, but also those spectacular pieces of imperial jade. I have here a presentation box. This is the kind of gift that would have been used for presenting as a gift, I should say. Incredible gold work with inlaid semi-precious stones on the exterior, in this case looking like a floral basket that overflows with these auspicious symbols. Just really beautifully worked piece of gold. And there are 5 of these boxes that came to us from Mr. and Mrs. Searle. So you can imagine this is material that's easy to love. It's clearly opulent, spectacularly worked, sort of technically very beautiful and astonishing. And so it continues to captivate our audience today, 70 years after it was given. We continue to collect Chinese art. Recently we've amassed important collections of Chinese furniture in particular. But this material falls squarely into Chinese taste, and the fact that it was often commissioned by high-ranking people at court or the emperor himself means that it's highly sought after today. Now, the Searles capitalized on turmoil in China in the early part of this century, and is when Mr. Searle acquired most of this material. It would be virtually impossible for us to acquire this collection today. Rarely do pieces of this quality come onto the market, and when they do, we would face heavy competition from the Chinese themselves. So we are looking at a portion of the textile collection. Now, the Searles didn't give us many pieces of textiles, and in fact what they did give us we didn't use for a very long time. But they had a few examples of really exquisite embroidery. We're looking at a bolster pillow here and a backrest in this case, or a seat cushion for a chair. But the amazing thing about these, of course, is that they're on imperial yellow and that they're just fantastically embroidered. I'm going to move a little bit closer. So you can see that even these leaves have very delicate shading, very, very minute stitches of silk centered around this glorious lotus here in the center. So really just top craftsmen commissioned to do these very special pieces that would have made Chinese hardwood furniture a little more comfortable. Now, this is a bolster, and it would have been used, of course, just to lean on a Chinese-style couch or bed. Would have been a bolster on either side, and you could have just leaned your elbow on it. But there again, really spectacular embroidery. In this case, around this central floral pattern are bats, which in Chinese are considered auspicious creatures. So when we have the imperial throne on view, it's often outfitted with these pieces of textiles.